Then, having taken him, he brought him to the chiliarch and said, The prisoner Paul, having called me to himself, asked that I bring this young man to you who has something to say to you. Then the chiliarch, having taken him by his hand, and having withdrawn, went to inquiring of him privately, What is it that you have to report to me? And he said, The Jews agreed among themselves to ask you to bring Paul down to the Sanhedrin tomorrow, as though about to be inquiring more accurately concerning him. As for you, therefore, do not permit yourself to be persuaded by them, for there lie in ambush for him more than 40 of their men, those who are such that they invoked God's curse upon themselves should they break their vow not to eat nor drink until such time as they have destroyed him. And now they are in readiness, looking for the promise from you. So then the chiliarch dismissed the young man, having charged him to tell not even one person these things which he had made plain to him. And having called to himself a certain 2 of the centurions, he said, Make ready at once 200 heavily armed foot soldiers, in order that they may proceed to Caesarea, and 70 soldiers of the cavalry unit, and 200 lightly armed soldiers, about 9 o'clock at night, and furnish them beasts of burden, in order that having mounted Paul upon one, they might bring him safely through to Felix the governor. And he wrote a letter having this form: Claudius Lysias, to his excellency, the governor Felix, greeting. This man, having been seized by the Jews, and about to be put out of the way by them, having rushed in the nick of time with my heavily armed legionaries, I rescued, having learned that he was a Roman. And desiring to come to know fully the cause on account of which they were bringing a charge against him, I brought him down to the Sanhedrin, their council, whom I found to be accused concerning questions of their law, but having not even one thing worthy of death or bonds laid to his charge. And when it was pointed out to me that there would be a plot against the man, immediately I sent him to you, having given orders also to his accusers to be telling before you what they have against him. So then the soldiers, according to the order given them, having taken up Paul, brought him through a night of travel 40 miles to Antipatris. And on the next day, having left the horsemen to be going with him, they returned to their barracks. And they, having gone on to Caesarea, and having delivered the letter to the governor, presented also Paul to him. And having read the letter, he also asked as to what kind of a province, senatorial or imperial, he came from. And having ascertained that he was from Cilicia, he said, I will hear fully and adjudicate your case whenever also your accusers have come, having previously ordered that he be put under guard in the place of Herod. Now, after 5 days, the chief priests with certain elders and a certain prosecuting attorney, Tertullus, came down, who were such that they preferred charges before the governor against Paul. And after he, Paul, was called, Tertullus began to be accusing him, saying, In view of the fact that we are obtaining much peace through you, and evils are constantly being corrected and things set right for our nation through your forethought in all ways and in all places, we accept these, most illustrious Felix, with all gratefulness. But in order that I may not further cut in on your time and detain you from your beneficent reforms, I beg of you to hear us in your sweet reasonableness, and we will be concise. For we found this man to be a pest and a plague, and an instigator of insurrections among all the Jews throughout the Roman Empire, and a front-rank champion of the heretical sect of the Nazarenes, who also attempted to profane the temple, whom also we seized, whom you will be able, having yourself conducted an investigation concerning all these things, to come to know fully the things of which, as for us, we are accusing him. And the Jews also joined in the charge, affirming that these things were so. And Paul answered, the governor having nodded to him to be speaking, knowing that for many years you have been a judge of this nation, I confidently present my defense with respect to the things concerning myself, you being able to understand that there are not more than 12 days since I went up to Jerusalem to worship. And neither in the temple did they find me disputing with any certain individual, nor stirring up a crowd, nor even in the synagogues, nor in the city. Neither are they able to substantiate before you the charges concerning which they now are accusing me. But I confess this to you, that in accordance with the way, which system of belief they call heresy, thus am I serving the God of my fathers, believing all things which stand written according to the law, and those things in the prophets, having hope toward God, which hope they themselves also look for, that there shall be a resurrection of both the just and the unjust. And in this also I myself am constantly disciplining myself to be having a conscience which does not cause offense to God and to men at all times. Now, after an interval of some years I came, having brought alms to my nation and sacrificial offerings, in the presenting of which offerings they found me ceremonially purified in the temple, not with a crowd nor with an uproar. But certain Jews from Asia, who ought to have been present before you and to be bringing accusation if they were having anything against me, or let these themselves tell what wrongdoing they found when I stood before the Sanhedrin, except concerning this one voice which, while standing among them, I cried aloud, concerning a resurrection of dead people, I am being judged today by you. Then Felix put them off by deferring the hearing and the deciding of the case, knowing more accurately the things concerning the way, having said, when Lysias the Chiliarch comes down, I will determine the things which pertain to you. He gave orders to the centurion that he should be kept under guard, and that he should relax the severe conditions of imprisonment and make things easier for him, and that he should not forbid any of his own people to be ministering to him. Now, after certain days, Felix, having come back with Drusilla, his wife, who was a Jewess, sent for Paul and heard him concerning his faith in Christ Jesus. And while he was discoursing concerning righteousness and self-control and the judgment which was about to come, Felix, having become terrified, answered, be proceeding on your way for the present, and having found an opportune time, I will summon you. At the same time also hoping that money will be given to him by Paul. On this account also he kept on sending for him more frequently and conversing with him. But after 2 years had gone by, Felix was succeeded by Porcius Festus, and desiring to ingratiate himself with the Jews, he left Paul behind in shackles. Then Festus, having come into his province, after 3 days, went up to Jerusalem from Caesarea. And the chief priests and the principal men among the Jews laid legal and formal information against Paul before him, and they kept on begging him, asking as a personal favor for themselves against him to the effect that he would send for him to be brought to Jerusalem, all the while preparing an ambush to put him out of the way along the road. Now then, Festus answered that Paul was kept in charge in Caesarea and that he himself would proceed there shortly. Let those therefore among you, he says, who are vested with power, having gone with me, assuming that there is anything amiss in this man, bring accusation against him. And having spent not more than 8 or 10 days among them, having gone down to Caesarea, on the next day having taken his place on the judge's bench, he commanded Paul to be brought. And after he had come down, the Jews who had come down from Jerusalem took up positions in a circle around him, bringing against him many and weighty accusations, which they did not have the ability to prove by argument, while Paul was saying in his defense, Neither against the temple nor against Caesar did I sin in anything. But Festus, desiring to ingratiate himself with the Jews, answering Paul, said, Are you willing, having gone up to Jerusalem, there to be judged concerning these things in my presence? Then Paul said, I have taken my stand before the judgment seat of Caesar, and here I stand where it is a necessity in the nature of the case for me to be judged. To Jews I have not done even one wrong thing, as also, as for myself, you understand very well. Now, therefore, assuming for the moment that I am a wrongdoer or have committed anything worthy of death, I do not refuse to die. But since there does not exist even one thing of those things of which these accuse me, no one has the power to give me up as a favor to them. I lodge my appeal with Caesar. Then Festus, after he conferred with his council, answered, You lodged your appeal with Caesar, to Caesar you shall proceed. Now, certain days having elapsed, Agrippa the king and Bernice arrived at Caesarea and paid their respects to Festus. And when they had spent many days there, Festus laid the things concerning Paul before the king, saying, There is a certain man who has been left behind by Felix in shackles, concerning whom, when I was in Jerusalem, the chief priests and the elders of the Jews informed me, requesting as a personal favor to themselves a condemnatory sentence against him, to whom I answered, It is not a custom with Romans to be giving up to another any man whom he may punish or put to death before the one who is accused have his accusers face to face, and have opportunity to present a defense with reference to the accusation. Therefore, having assembled here without one bit of delay the next day, having sat down on the judge's bench, I commanded that the man be brought, concerning whom after his accusers stood up, they brought not one accusation with reference to such pernicious things as I surmised, but they were having certain questions against him concerning their own religion and concerning a certain Jesus who was dead, whom Paul has kept on asserting is alive. And as for myself, being perplexed with reference to an inquiry concerning these things, I went to asking him if he would desire to be proceeding to Jerusalem and there be judged concerning these things. But since Paul had made his appeal to be reserved for the decision of the August one, I commanded that he be kept until I should send him up to Caesar. Then Agrippa said to Festus, I myself also was wishing to hear the man. Tomorrow, he said, you shall hear him. Therefore, on the next day Agrippa, having come, and Bernice, accompanied by much pomp, and having entered the courtroom, both with chiliarchs and the outstanding men of the city, and Festus having given the order, Paul was brought in. And Festus says, King Agrippa, and all those men who are present with us, you see this man concerning whom the entire multitude of the Jews petitioned me both in Jerusalem and here, shouting that in accordance with the necessity in the nature of the case, he ought no longer to be living. But as for myself, having learned that he had done nothing worthy of death, and that he himself had appealed to the August one, I determined to be sending him, concerning whom I do not have anything definite to write to my Lord. Because of this, I brought him before you all, and especially before you, King Agrippa, in order that after the examination has taken place, I may have something to write. For it seems to me contrary to reason, sending a prisoner and not indicating the charges against him. Then Agrippa said to Paul, Permission is granted to you to be speaking on behalf of yourself. Then Paul, having stretched out his hand, went to presenting his verbal defense. Concerning all things of which I am being accused by the Jews, King Agrippa, I have considered myself fortunate that I am about to be presenting my verbal defense today before you, since you are especially especially expert with reference both to all the customs and also questions regarding the Jews. On this account, I beg of you to hear me patiently. Now, therefore, the manner of life which was mine from youth, that which was from the beginning among my nation in Jerusalem, all Jews know, having previous knowledge of me from the very first, if they would be willing to be bearing testimony, that according to the sect in our religious discipline, which was most precise and rigorous in interpreting the Mosaic law and observing even its most minute precepts, I lived as a Pharisee. And now, upon the basis of the hope of the promise made by our God to our fathers, I stand here being judged, which promise our 12 tribes earnestly night and day rendering sacred service to God are hoping to arrive at, concerning which I hope I am being accused by the Jews, O King. Why is it, being judged by you all, an unbelievable thing that God raises dead individuals, as he has done? As for myself, verily, I was of the opinion that it was a necessity in the nature of the case for me to do many things against the name of Jesus, the one from Nazareth, which also I did in Jerusalem, and many of the saints. As for myself, I shut up in prisons, having received the authority from the chief priests. And when they were being put to death, I registered my vote against them. And often, in every synagogue, while punishing them, I kept on attempting to compel them by contemptuous speech, intentionally to come short of the reverence due to God. And possessing an insane fury against them beyond measure, I went to persecuting them even to foreign cities. Being engaged in these things, while I was proceeding to Damascus with authority and a commission from the chief priests, at midday I saw along the road, O King, a light from heaven above, the brilliance of the sun shining down about me and those who were traveling with me. And after all of us had fallen down upon the ground, I heard a voice saying to me in the Hebrew dialect, Saul, Saul, why are you persecuting me? It is hard for you to be kicking against the goads. And as for myself, I said, Who are you, sir? And the Lord said, As for myself, I am Yahushua, whom as for yourself, you are persecuting. But arise at once and stand upon your feet. For this purpose I appeared to you, to appoint you as one who ministers, and as one who bears testimony, both to the things you saw and to the things in which I will appear to you, delivering you from the people and the Gentiles, to whom, as for myself, I will send you on a mission to open their eyes, that they may turn from darkness to light and from the authority of Satan to God, that they may receive forgiveness of sins and an inheritance among those who have been sanctified by faith which is in me. Wherefore, O King Agrippa, I did not become disobedient to the heavenly vision, but both to those in Damascus first, and in Jerusalem, and in all the region of Judea, and to the Gentiles, I kept on bringing word that they should be repenting and turning to God, doing works that weigh as much as the repentance they profess. On account of these things, the Jews, having made me a prisoner, were attempting to kill me. Therefore, having the help that is from God until this day, I stand testifying both to small and great, saying nothing except the things which the prophets and Moses said are destined to take place, that the Christ is to be a suffering Messiah, that he being the first to arise from the dead is destined to be proclaiming light to the people and to the Gentiles. And as he was saying these things in his defense, Festus says with a loud voice, You are going insane, Paul. Your vast learning is turning you around to insanity. But Paul says, I am not going insane, most illustrious Festus, but words of truth and soundness of mind am I uttering. For the king knows about these things before whom I also am speaking freely. For I am persuaded that none of these things is hidden from him. For this thing has not taken place in a secret place. Are you believing, King Agrippa, the prophets? I know positively that you are believing. But Agrippa says to Paul, with but such little persuasion you are attempting to make me a Christian. But Paul said, I am praying to God that whether by little or by much persuasion, not only you but also all who are hearing me today would become such as even I am, except these chains. And the king arose, and the governor and Bernice, and those seated with them, and having withdrawn, they were speaking to one another, saying, not even one thing worthy of death or bonds is this man doing. Then Agrippa said to Festus, this man could have been released if he had not appealed to Caesar. Now, when it was determined that we should sail away to Italy, they gave both Paul and certain other prisoners of a different type into the custody of a centurion named Julius, belonging to the Augustan military cohort. And having gone on board a ship of Admiritium, and having gone on board a ship of Admiritium, which was about to be sailing to places along the coast of Asia, we put to sea, there being with us Aristarchus, a Macedonian of Thessalonica. And on the next day we landed at Sidon, and Julius treated Paul kindly, giving him permission to go to his friends to receive care and attention. And having put out to sea from there, we sailed under the sheltered protection of Cyprus because the winds were against us. And having sailed across both the sea, which is off the coast of Cilicia, and that which is off the coast of Pamphylia, we came down to Myra in Lycia. Little kids whipping around on their motorcycles. And having found there a ship of Alexandria sailing to Italy, he put us on board. And when we sailed slowly for a considerable number of days, and with difficulty along this Cnidus, And when we sailed slowly for a considerable number of days, and with difficulty down along Cnidus, since the wind did not permit our straight course onwards, we sailed under the protective shelter of Crete, off Cape Salomon, and with difficulty coasting along it, we came to a certain place called Snug Harbors, which is near the city of Lycia. Now, a considerable time having elapsed, and the voyage already being dangerous, and also because the fast already was past, Paul went to exhorting them, saying to them, Men, I perceive, as the result of past experience and observation, that the voyage is destined to be with injury and much loss, not only of the cargo and the ship, but also our lives. But the centurion allowed himself to be persuaded by the steersman and the skipper, rather than by the things which were being spoken by Paul. And the harbor being unfit as a place in which to spend the winter, the majority gave it as their counsel to put out to sea from there, if somehow they might be able to reach Phoenice, and there to spend the winter, this being a harbor of Crete looking to the northeast and southeast. And a south wind having blown gently, thinking that they had obtained their purpose, having hoisted their anchor, they sailed along Crete close inshore. Now, after no long time there beat down from it mountainous Crete, a wind of typhoon proportions, which is called Eurykilo, and the ship having been caught by it, and not able to face the wind, having given up to it, we were carried along. And running under the protective shelter of a certain island called Clauda, we were with difficulty able to get possession of the little boat, which, after they had hoisted it up into the large boat, they went to using things that would aid us, putting chains around the hull of the ship to hold it together. And fearing lest we veer from our course and be driven against the shoals and rocks of the Syrtis, having taken in some of the sails, we were in this manner being borne along. And we being greatly beaten about by the storm, on the next day they began to be throwing the cargo overboard. And on the third day they threw out with their own hands the furnishing of the ship. Now, when neither sun nor stars were shining for many days, and no small storm was pressing down upon us, all hope that we would be saved, which hope was still clinging to us, was at last being stripped away from us. And when those on board had been long without food, then Paul, having taken his stand in their midst, said, Surely, O men, in view of the very necessity imposed by the circumstances, you should have taken my advice and not set sail from Crete, and to have incurred this harm and loss. And now I advise and exhort you to be of good courage. Keep up your spirits, for there shall be a loss of not even one life among you, but a loss of the ship, for there took a stand at my side this night a messenger of the God, whose I am, by my side this night a messenger of the God, whose I am, and to whom I render sacred service, saying, Stop fearing, Paul. It is a necessity in the nature of the case for you to stand before Caesar. And behold, God has graciously safeguarded you for all those who are sailing with you. On which account be having courage, men, for I trust God, that it shall be in the manner as it has been told me. However, it is a necessity in the nature of the case for us to be driven into a certain island. Now, when the 14th night came, as we were being driven to and fro in the sea of Adria, about midnight, the sailors began to suspect that some land was drawing near to them. And having let down the lead for the purpose of finding out the depth of the water, they discovered it to be about 120 feet. And after a little distance, having again taken a sounding, they found 90 feet. And fearing lest we should be driven somewhere against rocky places, having thrown 4 anchors out of the back of the ship, they kept on praying for day to come. Now, as the sailors were seeking to abandon ship, and had lowered the small boat under pretense of being about to be laying anchors out of the front of the ship, Paul said to the centurion and the soldiers, Unless these remain in the ship, as for you all, you will not be able to be saved. Then the soldiers cut off the ropes of the small boat and permitted it to fall off. Now, until that time at which it should become day, Paul kept on exhorting all to take food, saying, This is the 14th day in which you are looking ahead with expectation, continuing to be without food, having taken nothing. On which account I beg of you all, please, to take food, for this is for your preservation, for not one hair of your head shall perish. And having said these things, and having taken bread, he gave thanks to God in the presence of all, and having broken it, he began to be eating. Then all, having taken courage, they themselves took food. There were 276 souls on the ship. And having eaten food for their entire satisfaction, they began to lighten the ship by throwing its cargo of grain into the sea. Now, when day came, they attempted to recognize the land, but were unsuccessful. But they began to observe a certain bay having a beach, and they were deliberating with one another whether they would be able to drive the boat into it. And having cast off the anchors, they left them in the sea, at the same time loosing the bands of the rudders. And having spread the foresail to the wind, they began to hold the ship's course steadily to the beach. And having come unexpectedly upon a reef against which the waves dashed on both sides, they ran the vessel aground. And the front of the ship struck, remained immovable, but the back of the ship began to break up by reason of the waves. Now, The counsel of the soldiers was to kill the prisoners, lest anyone having swum out should escape. But the centurion, desiring to bring Paul safely through, kept them from their purpose and ordered those who were able to swim, having thrown themselves overboard, to get first to the land, and the rest, some on the one hand upon planks, and some on the other hand on pieces of the ship. And in that way it came to pass that all came safely through to the land. And having been brought safely through, then we recognized at once that the island was called Melita, and the inhabitants, who were such that they did not speak Greek nor did they possess Greek culture, showed us not the humane and kind treatment with which one meets ordinarily, but an uncommon, extraordinary, humane, and kindly treatment which was the expression of their natural affection for their fellow man. For, having set fire to a heap of sticks, they took all of us to themselves because of the rain which, having came down upon us, was now a steady downpour, and because of the cold. Now Paul, having gathered together a capacity load of dry sticks, and having put them upon the fire, a viper, having come out by reason of the heat, fastened itself upon his hand. And when the inhabitants saw the poisonous creature dangling from his hand, they kept on saying to one another, "No doubt this man is a murderer, whom, having been brought safely through out of the reach of the sea, the goddess of justice did not permit to continue living." Now, therefore, having shaken off the creature into the fire, he suffered not even one bit of harm. Now they kept on expecting that he was about to swell up or to be falling down dead suddenly. But while they were expecting this for a long time, and were seeing not even one thing of a harmful nature happening to him, having changed their minds, they went to saying that he was a god. Now, in that place there were the estates of the chief man of the island, who was named Publius, who received us hospitably and treated us in a kindly manner as his guest for 3 days. And it came to pass that the father of Publius was lying prostrate in the grip of an intermittent fever and dysentery, into whose presence Paul having come and having prayed, having laid his hands upon him, he healed him. Now, this having taken place, also the rest of those in the island who were in possession of infirmities came in a steady procession and were being healed, who also honored us with many honors, and when we sailed, put on board the things of which we had need. Now, after 3 months, we put out to sea in a boat which had passed the winter in the island, a ship of Alexandria, upon the prow of which there were painted the figures of Castor and Pollux, tutelary deities of sailors. Castor and Pollux, tutelary deities of sailors. And having landed at Syracuse, we remained there